till the end or drop them in the chat. But I am gonna transition this over to Jiwana. So thank you. And if you could mute yourself too, please, that would be super helpful. Over to you.
Great, thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. I'm Jiwana. I'm the program coordinator for the Color of Climate at Gateway Community Services, Maine. And are you ready if I start screen recording? Okay, cool. Great. So I run the Color of Climate program at Gateway Community Services, Maine. And if any of you folks are not familiar with Gateway, we are a community nonprofit that caters to the needs of specifically new Mainers most of the time. We're an immigrant-run organization, and I work on the Color of Climate on the nonprofit side, which is a NASA-funded program for climate literacy. So the COC was created in the summer of 2020 during the Black Lives Matter protests, with the entire world envisioning a society that is just and equitable. The youth within the Gateway programming identified the need for centering frontline communities in the work of climate change and environmental justice. So our mission was to build agency and leadership among youth of color and organize a network of educators working to support youth in frontline communities. Currently, there is a lack of climate change focused youth groups and educator networks in Maine that specifically cater to the voice and perspectives of people of color and their leadership, and very specifically in Maine, new Mainers. So when we were starting out the programming, we had a couple of goals of the types of subject matter that our programming would revolve around, things like food sovereignty, sea level rise, clean neighborhoods, redlining, climate refugees, and outdoor access, which are issues that we find are more specific to marginalized communities when we talk about climate change. But as we were moving forward in creating programming that was specific to marginalized communities and climate issues surrounding marginalized communities, we identified an issue in classrooms when it came to STEM learning and learning about climate literacy. And that was that a lot of students are having issues at home that make it difficult for them to learn in the classroom, specifically new Mainer students. Issues with getting adjusted to a new environment, language and culture, a lack of safe spaces, a lack of trusted individuals, issues with being parentified, housing issues, and issues with racism. And if you're a young person trying to learn about science or your new local ecosystem or anything at all, really, when you're in the classroom, issues like this can make it really hard to focus. And it can make it really difficult to cultivate an environment where you are willing to learn about these sorts of things. And so we kind of decided to shift gears just a little bit and reassess our goals because we wanted to make climate literacy available for our students and educators, but we also wanted to figure out a way to support a very specific demographic of people here in Maine. So looking at all of that, we decided that some of our focuses outside of our NASA goals, which are on the right side, would be getting students and educators outside, becoming literate in climate-related issues for marginalized people, and creating access to non-traditional learning environments and materials and culturally accommodating spaces for students and informed programming with outside educators and a designated network. And what that means is when we create climate programming, some of our goals in this are creating climate programming that is specific to a community that may not have all of their immediate needs addressed already. So it is a comfortable and safe place for them to learn. We also have our NASA goals, which are building a climate literate generation, bringing educators of all stripes together, connecting learning across boundary in and out of schools and places where youth can learn, and having folks see and utilize NASA assets that are available to them. So with all of these goals in mind, we decided to address two different sides, which was our youth side, which was cultivating outdoor STEM experiences, learning a new local ecosystem, encouraging curiosity and play and science learning outside of the classroom. And for educators, creating a climate education network, providing educators in classrooms culturally competent support, creating STEM resources that bypass cultural and language limits and culturally mediate. So some examples of what that might look like is unlearning unconscious biases to cultivate an accommodating space for students, cultivating informed programming with outside educators and cultural elders, folks that maybe our students might relate to more or be able to connect with more, learning how to become trusted adults for students that are experiencing hardship, advocating for student-led interest projects that are culturally and individually sustaining, incorporating multi-generational experiences, and creating projects in STEM that really bypass any language and cultural limits and that still encourage play and exploration in programming. And the results essentially look like creating really authentic outdoor experiences for our youth who come into our program. So we have um, a cohort of youth that we bring out to participate in a lot of different types of programming. So we've brought our youth to the Bigelow Institute for Ocean Sciences. We brought them to the Maine Local Living School. We're in talks of other like outdoor programs after the winter to take them to where they can engage and learn and play. And it's a matter of communicating with our educators or the folks who are putting on this programming to create a space where they feel safe and comfortable because some of our students are still really, really new and they're not quite accustomed to their ecosystem yet. Some of our students had never been on a boat before, or they've never dealt with the cold before. They're not really comfortable with the language yet. And so we also have a lot of students who are predominantly Muslim or students who have specific cultural needs that be attended to. So, gender separate, um, like accommodations if we're staying overnight, or if they can't stay overnight because their families don't feel safe and comfortable with the country that they're in yet, providing them with transportation to these outdoor experiences. Because it really is like an issue of accessibility. These students really want to have these experiences and go outside and learn about this new ecosystem that they're in and become climate literate and really engage with their surroundings, but sometimes it's a matter as small as transportation or the comfort of parents in a new country or somebody who's willing to work with a student whose English may not be the best to be able to participate in this sort of thing. And in doing that, we go back to our original goals that we outlined in the beginning, which were finding issues that are specific to marginalized folks, issues like food sovereignty and sea level rise and redlining, and creating programming around that subject that's informed and where the students feel like they can learn at their own pace. Our current age demographic is really broad. We have students from the age of 14 to the age of 19 who are encouraged to be curious and ask us for any type of programming that they may be interested in and want to participate in so we can provide that to them. And then on the educator side of things, we have educators who have predominantly new Mainer students or they themselves are educators of color. And we also have some educators who are new Mainers themselves who are facing specific issues in their classroom. Either they feel like their students are struggling with focus or don't have adequate support systems because they don't know their current rights in their classroom. We have students who may be struggling with the language and need interpretation services and want to learn about science and want to be engaged with science material or climate material. And they simply just don't understand the material that they're being provided with. So we're working on bridging that gap. Um, there's also barriers around communication and cultural backgrounds when it comes to approaching learning styles. Some students have come from places where, the relationship between teacher and student looks very different. and they may not quite understand what they're being asked to do in the classroom, or they don't know that they can ask for help or be provided specific services of support when they are not understanding the material or don't have an educator who can support them in the material. And something that's really great about Gateway is that because it's an immigrant run organization that caters specifically to the immigrant community here, and we have a side that helps new Mainers become settled and comfortable in their environments, we have the privilege of having their families and adults already have us as trusted individuals. So they feel comfortable bringing their kids to come spend time at Gateway and have somewhere outside the classroom where they're still encouraged to learn and participate and become accustomed to this new environment and climate, all while not having to worry as much about their safety or worry as much about differences in language or cultural limitations. And a big goal of ours is trying to bridge the culture at home versus school and really making that comfortable for our students so that they want to learn about science and they want to go outside and they want to become STEM literate. Um, that is pretty much the entirety of the program. Some other final notes is that we're in the works of creating cultural mediation sessions for students and admin and creating projects to happen inside of public school classrooms. And we also are looking for educators who need support in these circumstances to also come to us. And if they want to be a part of that conversation, we're more than willing to welcome them in and have that conversation with them and make them a part of what's happening at the Color of Climate. Thank you.
Jiwana, thank you so much for giving us a preview of the work you do. And I just want to emphasize, I think like just how important and a unique perspective, because I think when we think about environmental justice, at least I think about like everybody deserves to live in a healthy and safe environment, but it's also so important to learn about your environment and learn about climate change and your just local environment. And I think I mean, you're not living if you're not also learning. So I think like that's just such a unique perspective on this topic. And yeah, thank you for sharing the work that Gateway is doing because I'm just amazed. Um, and I hope people have questions, but you also have some like fantastic photos throughout your slideshow. And um, yeah, I would just love to even in that last slide, like were you guys like crushing apples?
Yeah, those photos were taken at the Maine Local Living School, and the Maine Local Living School was an opportunity for them to learn kind of about like a complete closed circle way of living. Um, So everything at the Maine Local Living School was fully sustainable, and our students participated in a lot of the activities that they normally did on the farm. So in that circumstance, they were cutting like the rotten parts out of apples that had been picked earlier in the year, and they were crushing them to make cider in a cider press. And then the beans were beans that had been harvested on the farm and that were separated by the students individually and poured into a bowl. And a lot of the food that they ended up preparing or interacting with that was grown on the farm and stored on the farm was food that they got to eat later. So they got to participate in every action, including even planting things while they were there, up to the point of consumption. And for some of them, it was really familiar because that's things that they did in the places that they came from, just in a different climate with different materials. And for some of them, it was entirely new, and they were all really excited to have this experience where they could participate and do things without having to worry about, language or feeling unsafe. And um, it was like a really, really comfortable activity for all of them where they just got to be outside and were encouraged to learn and play and explore.
That's awesome. I see, I think it's Julie who actually might be raising her hand.
Thanks. It is me, and I'm sorry. I'm in a place that's really loud, but I couldn't help but ask this question. This is a fantastic focus and a great framework for delivering this connection that young people need, just a connection to each other, a connection to the environment, and a learning space. And I totally love it. And I wonder, because there are so many uh, competing needs around like schools and funding and all this stuff, but there are great frameworks that exist. And I think about before school programs or after school programs. And if you guys have thought about like integrating your model into some type of before school or after school program in a way that those programs fill up first because they're the most cost effective. Other things are so expensive for people, but instead of kids just sort of sitting around in the gym and doing whatever, trying to bring your model into like first before or after care, and then second to curriculum.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So as for curriculum, we're really trying to get that started on the educator side of things. So taking the perspective that we've had with our youth, and the approach that we're taking in that circumstance and seeing how we can bring that into the classroom, which is what we're trying to do with the cultural mediation sessions, which is still kind of in the works, but we're hoping that we get there eventually. And we did just have Ryan Scallon from the Portland Public School System come to Gateway and sit down and talk to all of us about needs that we think have to be addressed specifically for our students and our kids in the New Manor community, that should be brought into the Portland Public Schools administration at least. As for a before and after school program, I think that's like a long-term goal. I think currently we don't have the staff to accommodate that. But that would be really, really great and hopefully really successful. We do have something similar with our CYC program, which is a civic youth engagement program where it's an after school program once a week, where students become they learn the skills to become leaders in their own community and things that they're passionate about within their own community. And those students are still welcome to participate in the Color of Climate programming. So they're still part of an after school program and they're doing the Color of Climate programming and events. But at this exact moment, the program is very fresh. So we're building the momentum to get to a point where we can have a lot more frequency in our activities and participation. But I think it's really necessary. And I think it would be really great to establish that and make that happen.
I see Michael
Sorry,
Dixon. Oh
sorry.
yeah, no,
Before,
go for it, Julie.
just sorry, Michael. Just before, I couldn't find the unmute. I love hearing that this is a long-term goal, and of course you have to staff up and everything. And I would just put in a plug for, I think our parks and rec departments administer before and after care, and it might be easier to work first through those type of programs because a curriculum is a whole nother beast. So just putting that plug in, and thanks for the work you're doing, and it all sounds great.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I'm really interested to hear about your program and meet you, and I hope I can continue the conversation offline. I'm a member of a PTO at one of the local schools, and we've been trying to raise money to support our living schoolyards, with an idea that, our kids, as great as your programming is and as great as the suggestion of doing after school would be, the kids are in school 6 hours a day, 185 days a year. There's a prime opportunity there, we think, to really engage in all of this kind of environmental literacy and climate awareness, and especially, as you point out, for kids for whom this is all very new. The school I'm working with has an 80% minority population. And I don't know South Portland's situation so well, but I know that Portland has already cut its budget and staffing for exactly this kind of programming in half. and that they're threatening to do it entirely this year, and that the budget is going to go to zero for exactly this kind of programming. And I heard that from Dr. Scallon himself. So I'm just wondering, how can we impress upon Dr. Scallon and the school board and our neighbors the importance of at least maintaining, if not increasing, these opportunities, especially for our BIPOC students. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really, really important question to ask. And I think it's really difficult, especially with the fact that, schools are already underfunded and having a difficult time as is, and teachers are really, really spread thin. So that definitely plays a part. I think that one of the ways to encourage that kind of growth is to provide support as a local organization in terms of staffing and contribution in the school system, at least to alleviate some of that pressure, if that's one of the concerns in preventing this kind of programming. That would be one thing out of the way. As for the other half of your question is how to make that, I guess, show its significance to the point in where it becomes established in schools. I think it's really just cultivating these kinds of experiences and showing the results of that, which is unfortunate timing as it's already being cut in school systems. But I think that, it's really hard, even on Gateway's end of things initially, to really encourage people and show people how significant it is to have climate programming, even something as small as having like a living garden, because they don't really understand the impact that that has on students. But at least for what I've recognized in our students is that there's this real necessity for tangible experiences and for curiosity and play in the classroom when learning, because it keeps our students engaged, as not all students learn the same way. And some of them do need to touch and connect and engage with the environment in order to really show their interest in these subjects that they may not normally show interest in their classrooms. And so for us, it's really creating the experiences at as little cost possible to make that happen, and give our physical support as an organization to make that happen. And then when we have positive results, show that to the school systems or to the parents or the people who really care about it, and encourage them to apply that pressure, so that this does happen for our students. Because 99% of the time, the students are not always willing in the beginning. They don't really even themselves understand why we're encouraging them to do this. But then when they go and they have the experience and they spend that time and they feel that significance, and it provides that newfound interest for them, and everything is taken care of, like physically, like they don't have to worry about transportation or not being accommodated to by their educators, it happens with a lot more ease. And I think that that plays a really big role in the school systems as well. So my understanding is, if we provide as much support possible outside of the school system to make that happen, when we go to the school systems and we show them the results of this kind of programming and show them that we can make it happen, even without a lot of funding or even without additional staff, even ourselves just coming in as outside educators and providing that support, it's a little bit more likely to happen. And my hope is that it will happen eventually.
Thank you, Jiwana. I think Bill Weber, your hand might be next, and then we'll go to Luke.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jiwana. I've got two questions. One is, don't know whether you know if how many of the families that you're serving are actually climate refugees, and whether that's sort of part of your program. And then the second question or comment I have is I've worked with Nate Davis a little bit and tried to get him interested in the Make It Happen program in Portland Public Schools. And I think that could be a very good venue to introduce students, because a lot of the issue is scheduling, and that Make It Happen program, which I think has now been extended to Deering and maybe even to middle school, at least has a block of time where tutors or coaches like myself come in and work with kids on an individual or group basis. But I think that probably would be a very valuable route to look at.
Yeah, thank you. If you would like to connect with me, I would absolutely love and appreciate that. I think that's a great venue and a great way to go into things. As for the climate refugee question, I do know that there are a handful of students whose families are from regions where the climate is a very significant changing issue and may have contributed to the reason why they have come to the States. But I would also say, at least from my perspective, for the folks who are coming from regions that are either war torn or, are no longer deemed safe because of things like bombings and issues that are happening within their own homes, I would honestly consider that, an issue to our climate as well, as they are things that are harming our climate, and our climate is being in a living, healthy ecosystem. And I think that contributes to the harm. I mean, my family came from a region that is heavily agricultural. And, we're an indigenous people, and they used chemical gas in that region. And that also contributes to the livelihoods of the people there because it damages the environment significantly. So even if that stops, it has a long-term effect on the health of the ecosystem as a whole. And I would genuinely consider that to be part of the climate crisis, and something that's not often thought about in the perspective of issue like war. So whether that was my parrot, whether it comes to it being an issue of unlivable circumstances due to temperature or sea level rise, or unlivable circumstances due to war, I do believe that it is all somehow still connected to the climate.
For sure. Thank you.
That was definitely something on my mind as well as we were having this conversation. And I think it highlights the need for this program. And yeah, kind of back to what Michael raised, I think there's just such a necessity for this type of work. And it's only going to become increasingly needed as we see more and more climate refugees. And refugees for a multitude of reasons. It's all kind of hand in hand, reasons why people move. I think there was another question, if Luke is still on.
Yeah, thanks. Awesome work, by the way. This is fascinating to learn about. I'm really happy this is going on. Can you talk a little bit? I don't have a perfectly formed question, but I know that one of the challenges when working with communities is that New Manors can be treated like a monolith sometimes, when in reality it's a variety of different groups that are here. And in conversations, Katie said something that jogged my mind. I'm not going to get it exactly right, but something around like, what is sustainability? And I think that's an important question, because there's a lot of perspectives on what that means, and then factoring in, basic hierarchies of needs. So, how are you engaging with sustainability? And if you could just talk a little bit more about either the program or some things you've seen in that, because I see that come up in a lot of different areas, and I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. So one thing about Gateway, when it comes to cultural variety, is that we have the privilege of having folks from a lot of different backgrounds. It is like an immigrant, like I said, run organization. And a part of that is, a lot of the times we hire other folks who have been immigrants, are first generation, or are somehow connected to the immigrant community. And obviously there are some folks who are not. But that gives us the privilege of having a lot of different cultural backgrounds in one space. So a lot of the time, if a student has a language or cultural barrier, we almost always have someone available who is available to connect with them and have a conversation with them and understand what's going on. It's very infrequent that we don't, but in the circumstance that we don't, there's usually a community member that we can reach out to and bring in. And it does definitely sometimes provide like tricky situations where we don't always have the immediate know or right tools to approach a student's needs. But most of the time, if we just communicate and we ask, you know, what's most comfortable for them or ask them what they need. They trust us enough to let us know and we can go out and find that for them. Um, and in terms of sustainability, I think that it really looks different for all of our students. Some of our students are Indigenous people who have come here from a different background and grew up in a very agricultural or climate connected environment and have a lot of their own perspective and experiences just in a different location. And I think what's really great is that for some of the students who may not have that experience, or students who are coming from a different environment than they are, um, they all sort of provide each other with knowledge from different backgrounds and different experiences and different ideas of what sustainability looks like. Um, we currently have students from Puerto Rico, Somalia, Afghanistan. We have folks from Congo. We have Sudanese students, um, students who are coming from different backgrounds, dealing with different climates and different climate related issues and different lifestyles. And I find that even myself, as an Indigenous person coming from one background, when I'm with my students and we're talking about sustainability and we're talking about climate and having that variety of perspectives, actually contributes really well to the conversation, because we're thinking about sustainability in a bunch of different aspects, and not just one understanding of what that looks like, because everybody has individual needs or concerns when it comes to the climate based on their own background and experience that we can talk about and explore and address with our students, which I think is an incredible privilege, because there's not always environments where we can do that well. I mean, myself, even having grown up here, and understanding what my environment looks like, where my family comes from, and then a really good understanding of my environment here is still technically a limited perspective in terms of when one of my students comes from West Africa and is telling me about their concerns, where they're from. And in terms of sustainability, in the program and the things that we're doing in practice, I think that what's really great is we can provide some climate experiences where they do things like go to an ocean science lab and learn about ocean climate, and then go to a farm and learn about closed circle living, or have garbage to garden come in and talk to them about compost and have them plant their own herbs. Is that it encourages them to find interest in things maybe that they don't know about, or bring up things that are close to them and personal. And when they do that, they can ask us and say, I'm really interested in this thing that's important to the climate that maybe we haven't thought about before, and I want to work on something with this. And we can create student-led programming based on their interest in terms of climate science, and completely go in a different direction if that is what they want and what they're comfortable with, because at the end of the day, they're still learning, and they're learning about climate and sustainability. And it really, really also benefits us as a whole, because now we're approaching all these different issues that are all connected by the same thing, and they have the opportunity to really explore that to the fullest. And if they want to continue from there on out, like we had some students who went to the ocean sciences program at the Bigelow Institute, and they were like, we want to come back in the spring for their student program long term, and we want to study here, for a while, because this is really important to us. And it encourages them to also get into fields where they can use that perspective that they have and the perspective that they've gotten from their peers, and those things that are not just important to them, but important to the people that they've come to care about, as a student group, and take that into the field that they want to learn about. And I think that's really important as well, because I feel like being in one climate in one area can really limit that perspective, and this is an opportunity for them to do even more.
That's great. Thank you. That's a lot of awesome information. Thanks for what you're doing.
Beautiful. I see Abigail Long next.
Hey, Jiwana, really awesome to hear more about the program. You mentioned that you have like a great advantage that you have the trust of the parents and the guardians of the youth. So I'm curious if you ever do programming with families or see any interest in family programs.
Yeah, that's a great question. We invite family members to come on programming experiences if they're comfortable and they want to. We've had some family members come to experiences. So But it really depends on their comfort level and their interest. We had a climate event it was a job fair actually for sustainable jobs at Gateway. And we had folks from the main AFL-CIO and folks who work in renewable energy come in, and we had interpreters and a bunch of community members, family members alike, come in and learn about renewable energy jobs and renewable energy programming. And I saw a lot more parents at that event. I think it was either they were interested themselves in jobs like that, where they were union protected and contributing to the climate, or they were interested for the sake of their children. We're looking to make more programming that doesn't require as much travel or distance, in case parents who are limited on time and dealing with a lot at home maybe want to come and participate for something small held at Gateway that is climate relevant, but more accessible to them, because sometimes our programming is an overnight, and it's like a 2-hour, 3-hour drive away, and parents don't always want to come along for that, or they have other kids at home that they need to worry about. But they're always invited to join. We actually encourage parents to come along with us, and we do see them on occasion, depending on what the programming is. And we're working on trying to create smaller events as well, and not just large outdoor programs, so that if parents don't have the time to commit to like a 2-day retreat, they can come to a 1 or 2 hour event at Gateway and learn about the things that their students have been doing, or their children have been doing.
So interesting. And yeah, it is really important, I think, to get parents involved too. Sometimes they're part of the learning experience very much. So, I'll pass this over to Steph. Steph, if you still have a question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful presentation. You mentioned in one of the slides about like mobilizing a climate education network. And I was curious if you could speak more to that, and if you're already kind of plugged into like the Nature-Based Education Consortium and some of their climate-led advocacy. So yeah, networks. Curious if you could chat more about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. And I assume you're talking about NEVIC. I believe I am already connected with them. And we have what we call a connected learning ecosystem. So this is actually one of our NASA requirements. Since our funding comes through NASA, through the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, Gateway is required to have something that's called a connected learning ecosystem, which exists all over the Northeast in a wider network. And normally these connected learning ecosystems, which is just a group of educators, normally by region, that are climate related or STEM related, or just educators who have like a climate interest and passion, are able to connect and work on certain issues together. The way that we vary Gateway in having our connected learning ecosystem is that it's identity based instead of regional. So we focus more on educators of color, or educators who have predominantly New Mainer students, or predominantly non-white students, and have specific needs when it comes to those students in their classrooms that need to be met. And what we do for them is we have a meeting once a month for these CLEs, and we bring these educators together and we discuss things that we want to address in the classroom, things that we want to address outside the classroom, things that might be specific to their students, or educators struggle when it comes to connecting with their students, and figuring out our best approach in addressing those issues. And also if they have any specific needs, as we do have our connection to the Gulf of Maine Research Institute and NASA, we have a variety of assets available when it comes to climate education to provide to educators. So we have forest health toolkits, we have ocean toolkits, we have pollinator toolkits, we have a variety of connections to other organizations that have programs available and material available for educators. So if there's something that they want for their classrooms that they're specifically interested in, we can direct them to that or provide that to them. We have folks at Gulf of Maine Research Institute who work on curriculum building. If there are educators that need help with building a certain curriculum because their students are interested in something in particular, GMRI has speakers available if we want to bring speakers into classrooms. They have so many resources that are available to educators. And so when we meet with educators for climate learning, they're able to come to us and say, hey, this is something that I'm interested in. This is something that I want to address. This is something I want to work on and bring into my classroom. And we can go out and find that for them and provide that to them and bring that into their classrooms and make it more accessible for them.
That is fantastic. And yeah, I'm just so happy we have some organization like this helping Mainers and Maine teachers. Wondering if anyone has any more questions. I think this presentation and especially even the question phase has been, I think everybody's brought up just, there's so many challenges to supporting this type of work and supporting climate learning for everyone. And I'm just so appreciative that so many people took time out of their day to come and join this conversation, because I think as kind of Michael brought up too, like it's such an important work, and I think spreading awareness of the necessity of this type of work is the way that we are going to make sure that it is sustainable and stays in our classrooms and stays a continuous program.
It takes
It does, but it takes spreading awareness too. So I think even just reflecting back on the conversation we had today and telling this story.
Sorry, I'm just gonna butt in. I'm wondering if, Jiwana, if you, we're gonna send like a follow-up email to everyone who attended this event and also registered. I'm wondering if you would be okay if we included your contact information. I think there were a couple people that mentioned, continuing conversation afterwards. Seems like there might be some good connections. So if you're okay with that, then we'll include that in our follow-up email.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually happy to do that. The more the merrier. Whoever wants to reach out to me, we can definitely connect.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, everyone. If there's no lasting questions, we can wrap this up on a sunny Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jiwana. This was a wonderful presentation and great discussion.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a good day.
Thank you. This has been, yeah, fantastic coffee and climate.